You are listening to the Mountainside Podcast, and our guest for this episode is John Norris. He's a retired lieutenant after 20 plus years of service with the California Department of Fish and Wildlife. John, during his career, helped co-found the marijuana enforcement team, protecting public lands from illegal cartel marijuana grow operations that heavily impact the environment, wildlife on public and private land. John has had an extensive career that he's highlighted in several books. He's the author of War in the Woods and Hidden War, going into vast details about some of the operations he's conducted, raising awareness about conservation and impacts to the environment in the worst way. It was an absolute honor and privilege to have him on tonight. He's a true outdoorsman, friend. This was a great episode, and I hope you enjoyed it. John, thanks for joining me tonight, man. Where are you joining us from? I know you're kind of all over the country sometimes.
Yeah, I'm actually back home for a minute up here in Northwest Montana, Bobby, and man, it's so good to be on your show. Thanks a lot for having me.
Man, it's an honor and a privilege to have you on. I've read Hidden War, for sure, and I haven't made it to War in the Woods yet, but it's on my list. It's in my Audible queue.
Okay, super cool, man. Thanks for diving in deep. I appreciate it.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate what you do, and conservation is super important to us here at the Mountainside. Environmental safety. It was actually kind of the premise of me starting the podcast, and we've gone down a couple different roads and avenues, you know, showcasing people from mountain athletes to we've had game wardens in from Colorado Parks and Wildlife. We're located in Colorado, and so I'm always good at trying to shed a light on as much conservation as we can. And I thought it was just totally interesting and incredible the amount of stuff that you've been through, just the impact to the environment that you've battled, man. Like it's hands down probably one of the most sickening, grotesque things I could imagine happening in the middle of a national forest, or even if it's private land, public land, or waterways and all that sort of stuff. And, you know, battling against these hardened criminals or, you know, organized crime type syndicates that in the middle of nature, you know, is insane. So I can't wait to do a deep dive with you on that. And, you know, for people that haven't read your book or don't know about you, can we just kind of dive into your background? And I mean, we can start all the way from the beginning, from childhood, and what got you into being a game warden and working for California Division of Wildlife, right?
Yeah, Department of Fish and Wildlife, Bobby. And I'll definitely dive in from the beginning, but you had mentioned reading Hidden War, and I appreciate that you did. And this is the first edition, the hardback that you've got. And we want to let your viewers know that we're down to about the last 100 of that first edition.
Oh, really?
And I haven't talked about it to too many people, but tonight I'd like to share with you and your listeners that we're going to have a second trade paperback with a new cover, a new forward, a new afterword, a whole new updated introduction. But you know what's in this book, you know, the original with the colored pictures and the really cool additional graphics and different chapters. So we'll definitely make sure if anybody wants a copy of the originals to gobble them up either on Amazon or from me through personal sales, because they're going quick. And then the second edition will be out much later this fall before the holidays. But you will lose a little bit from the first one, and of course you're going to gain some with the new one, and we're going to keep going down there. But that's just developed this week, literally, of getting all that into the publisher. So you're the first to hear about it. So I'm honored to share it with you guys tonight. But yeah, this whole thing, you know, it really started like what you love. I mean, you and I, and you know, everybody out there listening to your podcast or watching it, we all love the outdoors. We all love Mother Nature, right? We grew up thriving, finding our energy, our solitude, our mental health, stress relief, all of that in our wildlands, waterways, and wild areas. So I grew up hunting and fishing and hiking. You know, I was in the suburbs of the Silicon Valley, which, surprising to many people, the Silicon Valley has a lot of foothills around it. It's full of wildlife. You know, got the coast over there for fish, abalone, that kind of thing. And just grew up loving it. Learned to backpack in Henry Coast State Park. Talk about that in the first book a little bit. and never even knew that I could make a profession out of protecting the stuff I loved as a game warden, because I never met a game warden growing up. I just hunted, fished with my dad, spent all the time in the woods when I wasn't doing, finals and studies at San Jose State. In my undergrad work, I was racing back to the suburbs, in the foothills east of Gilroy there where I grew up, getting in the woods.
Yeah, I think I recall going back into the book a little bit that you were thinking about joining the military and then you kind of ran into a game warden or something, right? And that kind of
Yeah,
changed your
there
mind.
was a couple. Exactly, there was a couple things going on. I was actually in a civil engineering program and an impacted program in San Jose State, and I was also joining up with the ROTC, about to go into ROTC right when I started that program, to go into a special forces background and do my college, through military training and all of that. And then that first semester, actually on a winter break, I ran into a game warden for the first time in my life, like 13 miles way into the backcountry Henry Co. on a winter hike when nobody else was in that crazy park during a rainstorm, and ended up bending his ear for about 2 hours and keeping him there a lot longer than he probably wanted to be there. But my partner, Jeff Moore, who's my Baja racing buddy and outdoor, really the guy that got me into backpacking, and it's really his fault. I've been known the guy since second grade and one of those close friends. But he was the catalyst to putting me in that position to meet a game warden brother, and then that changed my life. I came out of that winter hike like 5 days later and went straight to the criminal justice advisory group over at San Jose State. And I switched my major from engineering immediately to criminal justice with an emphasis in wildlife bio so that I could become a game warden. And there was just no turning back at that point. I knew that was kind of my way to protect America domestically. And not only, game wardens don't only protect wildlife and enforce all of our hunting regulations and fishing regulations and environmental regulations, but we do everything else law enforcement generally have to do. We protect the public first and foremost, and we're called on to do that a lot more these days. So it was the perfect fit. So I really didn't look back, and always had a desire to serve my country in some way. My dad's a Army veteran, my grandfather a naval veteran, veterans all over in the family, and that's why I was, obviously gravitating toward the military. But there was a very limited window for non-veterans, white males in the early 90s to get the job, because there were so many thousands of
Right.
applicants, and with affirmative action and a lack of already being a veteran, having a veteran preference point, I was one of four civilians in my academy class at 24, that made the cut. And had I said no to that, I may not have ever gotten hired. So I really had to look at what was right in front of me and take that blessing from above and go for it. So I was very lucky, very blessed, bud, to be one of those four off the civilian list. And I was 21 years old, and not a whole lot of life experience other than college and being a probation counselor in juvenile hall and working with some of those problem kids and some that were going to be good kids if they had the right guidance and influence. And then I got the call, and it was, Fish and Game Academy. I was a squad leader of a squad of guys twice my age up
How'd
at
that go
Napa
over?
College. That was, yeah. When they told me, they said you have leadership skills. We're going to make you a squad leader, Sergeant Norris. And I went, what? I mean, some of these guys are state park law enforcement veterans. Some are SWAT cops, and I'm
Wow.
21, and they're like late 30s. And I'm gonna be their squad leader. Are you kidding me right now? But it was a great opportunity, and everything about that academy really dressed me well for the career. And I had some legendary TAC officers and mentors, guys like Gregor, Mike Carrion. You read about Mike in Hidden
Yeah.
War. He was a mentor and a guiding light for me in the academy. And fast forward to so many years later, having done so much stuff with him as my chief and my friend and my mentor, having enough faith in me and the other guys involved in building, this first ever tactical unit for game wardens, it was just a dream come true. And I'm really glad. Without those, leaders and mentors, you know how it is. You're kind of floundering out there treading water.
Yeah, it definitely takes some good mentorship to have any sort of career, no matter what you're doing, I think. So,
Yeah, yeah, it certainly made a difference. So that's how I changed. That's how I became a game warden, and spent, the first 15 years of my career. I was down in Southern California. Those listeners that are familiar with the LA, Riverside County, Inland Empire, I was a Temecula game warden and doing everything down there. And it was the Wild West, no joke. It was gang members coming over from LA to spotlight for anything that crawled.
It's
shoot
insane.
anything that flied, gill net fish. I mean, I talked to brother Joe Rogan on this subject on his podcast, and he's like, "What? You had gang members like poaching animals, and
It's
they
so
were
crazy
armed,
to
and
me. Yeah.
what's going on with that?" And again, I mean, sometimes you're better off not knowing what you don't know.
Yeah, no
So
joke.
I probably wouldn't have been as aggressive as I was to take on some of those folks, but I quickly learned where to get support. I learned tactics, ground tactics, arrest tactics, vehicle tactics, off road, all those different things you don't think about game wardens having to know. And there was a learning curve down there, brother, that was probably 5, 10-fold what it would have been had I got dropped right in my Silicon Valley suburbs where I grew up. But I spent 3 years down in Riverside, and then I got the opportunity to come back to the Gilroy position, which was my home area. And I was like on the fence. I was honestly considering not coming back home because I bought a house. My career was booming down there. It was so exciting. There was so much stuff going on. But again, just like getting hired, when you get a dream position and you don't take it and someone else comes in there, you may not get another good opportunity to go to a good position that you consider a dream for 5, 10, 15, 20 years.
Right. Your career
So
might be over at that point.
it it might be, bud, exactly. And I had, I was already halfway done with my master's degree in criminal justice. I had started my master's program because I was working part-time at juvenile hall, waiting for the state to decide if I was going to make the cut. And I had a 7-year window to finish that degree before I'd have to repeat classes. So it was kind of a no-brainer. I could go back home. I could work where I grew up. I had a lot of, common sense, I think, learning experience and applicable skills that I learned on the speed run, the bullet train down in Riverside.
Yeah.
And then I jumped right back into going to night school after patrol every day to finish my master's. And I made it before the deadline and got that degree. And things just blew up in the Silicon Valley on every level, all the way up until 2004 when I found my first cartel grow that the first book goes into in great detail, but Hidden War, the latest, does reference. And then that changed my career focus indefinitely up until retirement and the whole
That was one of my
road into.
questions. What when you first were going to school to be a game warden, wildlife biology, all that sort of stuff, what did you think you were going to be doing? Did you think you were going to be out checking like hunting and fishing tags and
Yeah, yeah,
mentoring young hunters and like
yeah.
that was kind of that's what I envision as a game warden.
Yeah, and that was honestly, you hit it on the head. And I wanted to do that. I wanted to, bust spotlighters at night. That was the big, in the game warden world, that was the big case to make. If you got somebody that's spotlighting deer at night, everything about them is wrong. They know it's wrong. It's dangerous. Usually there's drugs or alcohol involved. There might be some felony warrants that they've been avoiding and hiding out. I mean, we just get into that. So my thing was, I want to go out. I want to bust spotlighters because they're like the worst, one of the worst environmental criminals. And then, yeah, I wanted to check fishermen and anglers, and I wanted to validate a kid's first deer, and go through
Yeah.
that experience that I went through with my dad, and and be a friend of the conservationists. Because one cool thing about doing uniform standard patrol is 95+% of everybody you contact that has a gun is an ally. They're completely legal. They're diehard conservationists. They never take too many animals. They never hunt past time. They do everything by the book, and they're our eyes and ears. They're an extension of the game warden force, and we say we're the thin green line, right? I know you've heard that term. You've seen me talk about it. You've probably read it many times. But when I say thin green line, we're all part of that. It's not just me. It's you, because of the conservationists you are, and kudos, and I appreciate everything you're about. And what we're talking about on this podcast, and all our listeners are part of the thin green line, and we're a force multiplier. It's one big thin green line because there's so much pressure and so much destruction and so much poaching going on in the world right now that this thin green line is very tenuous. It's very fragile,
Yeah,
and
I
it
couldn't
takes
agree more with you.
right? It takes you helping broadcast it. It takes our public being out there to see violators and call the 1-800-CAL-TIP line, the turn in a poacher line, whatever state you live in. We couldn't do it without everybody. So I wanted to do all that basic stuff, and I did, and I
Yeah.
loved it. And the other thing I wanted to do, and I didn't realize this about myself, but my there was some leadership tendencies that my academy mentors and cadre saw, hence making me a squad leader early on. But I was good at it, and I was always there for my guys. I was always what I wanted to be, that kind of leader and not a supervisor. My dad and my uncles and anybody that serves said there's a big difference between leadership and managing. You know,
For
if you're
sure.
going to
Yeah.
lead, right, brother? If you're going to lead from the front. And that means you're not going to send people out to do jobs. You're not just going to, do the bean counting and cutting the paper and watching policy. You're going to go out and lead from the front. You're going to support your people. And I wanted to be that guy. And so I was becoming a firearms instructor, a defensive tactics instructor. I was becoming an instructor and a mentor for the Becoming an Outdoors Woman program that was a nationwide program that was just starting in the early 90s to bring mothers and daughters and aunts and all, that had been around hunting families maybe, but they had kind of been left out, because
Right.
of,
It
I
used
know
to be a
it's a,
guy's thing, right? Like me and the boys are
ex-
going hunting. You stay home, watch the kids,
exactly.
right? Now
Yeah.
it's turned into more of a couples retreat almost, you know?
Yeah, and you know what? That's history going in the right direction, right?
Right.
Like unifying everybody, not segregating anybody. And I was one of the youngest and first guys to build that basic shooting program and the
Very cool.
basic hunter education program. And so that was all in my first 3 years down there, and I really enjoyed it, and I really really honored it and really appreciated it. But that was happening early on in my patrol career, and indirectly, unbeknownst to me, it was leading up to what we would do with Met and what we would do at a much more extreme level as far as tactical capability, snipers, advanced canines, helicopter operations. I was a long way from that, but innately, it was the building blocks to help build that team and run it effectively and safely for sure.
Absolutely. And I definitely want to dive into more of that. It's super interesting. And I'm sure that you have some incredible stuff to tell us. But bringing it back for a minute to the thin green line that you mentioned and, hunter's education and sportsmen in general, I don't feel like there's anybody. And I think that sometimes we get a bad rap with the grip and grin photos or, all that sort of stuff. There's nobody that cares more about wildlife than those people that are out there actually interacting with it,
Right.
getting something out of it, some sustainability, maybe some provisions. Some people eat, I mean, I pretty
Hmm.
much eat wild game for every meal.
Right.
And I
Same way.
prefer
Yeah.
to,
Mostly. Yeah.
and it makes
Yeah.
me feel good. And I like the process and I like disconnecting from nature. But really, where I learned firearm safety, which I think is hugely important and really overlooked, not even if you're getting into hunting, the hunter safety course is a great way to learn firearm safety. I mean, that's
Yeah.
where I picked it up. And fortunately, I had some, I didn't grow up with a dad, but I had some great mentors and grandfathers and uncles that were all hunters and archery
Hmm.
hunters and stuff like that. And, they gave me my first gun and I was responsible for it, and I think that, I took mine in the state of Colorado and
Nice.
I learned so much about firearm safety at that point and how to be safe. And my only one complaint, my son is just turning 9, and so I need to get him lined up and get him in the course. That I think that we could be doing better. Just some constructive criticism is maybe teaching some of the ethics of hunting a little
I
bit,
agree.
because that
Yeah.
I feel like that's the only part that might be a little bit overlooked. And we've talked about it before on the podcast, but I was just wondering, do the curriculums, is it a federally composed, what I'm looking for the word here, curriculum? Is it
Yeah.
state by state? How's the literature and the test and the different protocols for what actually has to be a passing grade and not? Do you know much about that? And
Yeah, that's a really good question that no one's ever dove into, and I appreciate you asking it. But the International Hunter Education Association, I think it's called, I could be wrong, but there is an international and a national group that kind of have a general guideline of things we see, and that is the basics, all however many sections you have in hunter education now. But each state has some latitude as to what additional stuff they're going to put in there. Some states are putting in actual marijuana grows. There could
yeah,
be a cartel, public land, private land, trespass grow, and what to do if you run across it. Now, ironically, my own home state of California, where it's cartel central and we expose that issue through our work, doesn't have that in the book. And I've been working with the hunter ed coordinators up and through retirement and after and just go, what is not happening here? Why isn't this in
it's
hunter
so
education,
important
especially for
now,
Cal?
right?
Yeah, it makes no sense. So I don't know what's going on there, and I don't even want to, assume to speculate. But the bottom line is, it should be. Um, Ethics are covered, but to your point, they're not, they're very generalized, which is fine, but they need to be addressed, I think, much more personally. And I know when we were doing a lot more in-person, face-to-face courses before the pandemic, and we went mostly to online courses, where I got most of my ethics in hunter education, especially when teaching them, was those face-to-face classes. And my thing was, all my hunter safety instructors, say in South Silicon Valley, where I was the squad warden and then later the lieutenant, what we have to do as patrol wardens is we have to do minimum 10 hours of hunter education a year, whether coordinating classes, mentoring instructors, certifying instructors. But I would teach or co-teach like 3, 4 classes a year. And I'd always teach the wildlife conservation, the wildlife law, and I teach ethics, and that's just what my instructors wanted me to cover because obviously it was a good fit on the game warden side, and they'd cover all the other, and we tag team it. And I remember, I think you get the most responses when you talk about the ethics of things and you talk about scenarios where somebody didn't technically do something illegal, but they had a really, negative connotation toward respecting wildlife through how they practice that particular event. So I agree with you, and I'm glad you brought that up. And not very many people catch that, but it's really relative to the class that's being taken and who's instructing it in every state, how much ethics are covered, even though it's going to get covered for sure. There's going to be some questions on it in the test, but are you really talking about situational scenarios and how much are you dedicating to that? That's all relative and different for sure.
And I think a lot of it goes into just knowing your gear, knowing what you're hunting with, knowing the situations, and training, right? I mean,
Yeah.
especially me being a bow hunter, like I wouldn't even dream about going bow hunting if I haven't been shooting my bow for 3 months straight, and I shoot it year
Right.
round. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
I'm just
Yeah.
not that good, even with a
Yeah.
compound. So like I have to put in the work, and if I'm not, then I have to range myself to okay, it looks like I'm hunting from 40 yards this year or whatever. So
Yep.
yeah,
Yep.
which is more than fine. That's typically what I do anyways. Like most of the places where I find elk are deep dark holes, so it's hard
Yeah.
to get a longer shot than that unless you're in a burn or something. But yeah, no, the marijuana grow operations that you've been involved with, and feel like we don't see. I know it's happened in Colorado, and I want you to elaborate on that a little bit because a lot of our listener base is based in Colorado, but all around
Nice.
the U.S. and around the world, we don't quite have the climate to grow marijuana year round.
Right.
Water resources can be a little bit tricky here as well. You're dealing with the Rocky Mountains, so you're not going to be able to bury pipelines as easily and get
Sure.
stuff. I think it's just a much harder place to grow, and not to mention we're kind of in the middle of the country, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Um, but it's hard to grow tomatoes here. You know what I mean? So,
Right.
but yeah, I think that, more than I think a lot of people, what are the words I'm looking for? I think a lot of people think it's a war on drugs, right? And
Right.
you've made it very apparent, and I love the way that you share this, is the environmental impacts are way more significant to me than the actual busting the illegal operations of, I mean,
Right.
they both go hand in hand, but what these guys are doing to smuggle in all these different pesticides and fertilizers that are not approved in the US, right? So that's getting smuggled in, and then it's getting put into creeks and waterways diverted. I mean, just totally impacting an environment to the point where some of these pesticides, like in the book, you were explaining that if you were to ingest them, you could die.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, this stuff is nasty, and what you said was a good qualifier in the beginning. This is not a war on drugs. It's not a war on cannabis. It's a war on environmental crime, and it's a war on threats to our public safety. We have a legitimate cannabis industry and some really good farmers that are exemplary in conserving water. They care about wildlife as much as we do, and they're actually stewards of the environment, growing cannabis that are allied with us, calling our Met team Earth Warriors. Now
That's
where
cool.
did where could you ever imagine that? So you have the cannabis groups, the anti-cannabis groups, the left and the right, the politically conservative liberal, wherever you sit, all unified on one basic premise that nobody wants to see dead wildlife poisoned from EPA banned toxic that's a nerve agent that's so deadly it was banned by the EPA in the US 20 years ago to be used on agricultural crops legitimately. And and these guys are just nasty, and they're giving legitimate cannabis a really bad name. They're not only poisoning the water and the wildlife with these poisons, but this stuff is staying on the plant that's getting dried, and the bud material is getting, sent to the Midwest and to the East Coast and all over the, national black market with EPA banned nerve agent toxins on the bud. And kids and medicinal patients and adult recreational users in other states are ingesting this stuff, and they have no idea how deadly this stuff is potentially in the long term. So that's really what we're trying to fight. And, I was quoted by the Associated Press about 15 years ago of saying, anybody that thinks I'm an anti-weed guy, or this is a war on cannabis or a judgment and old school 80s war on drugs, and now we're still talking about cannabis like it's a problem. If we were making 4,000, if organized crime could make $4,000 a pound on the black market for cherry tomatoes, then we'd be getting in gunfights over cherry tomatoes, and they'd probably be poisoned with carbofuran. You
It's
and
an
I would eat a
incredible
sweet cherry
point. Yeah.
tomato, and we'd be, having like lung seizures. So yeah,
It'd be an
let's take the
Italian cartel, maybe.
there you go. Pesto section,
Yeah.
a mix. So brother, we got to look at this as, you know, cannabis activity is a catalyst to these crimes. We got to remember that these cartels, you mentioned Colorado, it's not really a good growing state, and you're right. It's not a California, one of 6 Mediterranean climates on the globe where we are the weed state, like we're the wine state, right?
Right.
We grow good grapes. We can have an outdoor season that's 10 months long. But, identify in the back sections, the appendix section of Hidden War, the demographic maps of where cartel grows have been found historically. And Colorado, they've been there. And I actually have pictures from high altitude mountain grows that are straight
Wow.
cartel, just like I would see in California. Now, granted, they're very infrequent, but they're out in your state periodically and
Hmm.
far less than California, thankfully. But 27 other states besides California have cartel grows in them. And they're usually going on in refuges, national forest, game farms, whatever the case may be. And the other thing we're seeing is, as I talk about at the end of Hidden War in the last chapter, of once a state regulates cannabis, thinking they're going to stop the black market, and I'm all for regulation if it's done, properly, that really deters criminal groups, the drug trafficking organizations, what they call now transnational criminal organizations, TCO for short, which is just a technical term for the cartels. Um, we are regulating in such a way in California is a bad example that we're incentivizing a black market. The black market has never been worse since Prop 64 passed 2 years before I retired.
Yeah.
Here we are 5 years later, and I'm going to talk about this in a documentary that producers, military veterans, and conservationists have worked with me on to tell the personal and professional story on, what's really going on out there. And we're talking about 3 years after retirement, operationally for me, 5 years after Prop 64 passes in California. Now we have the Asian cartels running rampant in Northern California. I just co-hosted Daily Caller's Narcofornia documentary with their host Jorge Ventura, and it was mind-blowing, Bobby, what we saw the week we were in Siskiyou County together. And on last raid day, Friday, after a long week of interviewing victims, farmers, ranchers, landowners in the most remote, rural, beautiful part left in California, below, 13,000 foot Mount Shasta, and they're literally being run out by Asian cartels. The water's being
Wow.
stolen from their wells.
Are those
They
grow
can't.
operations as well with the Asian cartels, or is it
They absolutely are. That's a
really?
new trend I'm just starting to talk about because Hidden War deals with the Mexican cartels primarily. And what we're going to do with the new edition is I'm going to update in that introduction about what the trends are now. And because we've minimalized, excuse me, to a misdemeanor and an infraction for trespass growing, for illegal growing in California, the cartels, whether they're Asian or Mexican or Russian or whatever, they don't have to go hide in the forest way out in the boondocks as much. They're going to private land, overt, they're remote, but you can drive right up to them. And they're doing just as much, if not more damage, as the outdoor trespass growers were in our national forest 3, 4, 5 years
Wow.
ago. We're seeing those still out there. And if they're somewhere out in a Colorado national park or forest stretch or California, pretty good bet they're, you can say 99% that's an organized crime grow. whether it's Mexican, Russian, Asian, gang, whatever, because the outdoor incentive is just pushing everybody to private land and doing it in plain sight because there's no real penalty if they get caught. And that's what we got to think about when we regulate state to state. And your home state of Colorado, my new home state of Montana, my old home state of the Golden State of California, we all have cannabis regulation going on. And the
Mm-hmm.
only reason you and I aren't overwhelmed in Montana and Colorado is because of climate. Otherwise, we would have the same problem, uh, depending on structure, that California is having. But California is the weed state of the world, not just the country. And it's failing really on protecting the environment or even public safety right
Wow,
now
that's
because of how
disheartening.
we regulate it. And that's something that, as conservationists, we all look at and go, well, it doesn't matter where you sit on cannabis, man. If you're going to regulate, we got to regulate smart, and we got to still go after those environmental
100%.
criminals and hit the environmental crimes. And we're trying to do that. We're fighting an uphill battle in California, my colleagues and my old teammates and numerous agencies. And I do a lot of work down there still, teaching, consulting, training, advising, educating, whatever I can do to lessen the blow. But it's very disheartening to see the amount of damage that goes on when we kind of incentivize this stuff for, especially if we love our wildlife.
Not to mention, at some point, if we let it go rampant, it could start turning into some sort of turf war type thing
Very
between
much.
different cartels, right? As well. So
Oh
now
yeah.
you got a whole nother issue on your hands.
Right. Right.
Um, I think we don't really dive into politics, but I'm going to bag on California here for a minute, just from a standpoint of,
It's hard not to. On
yeah,
this issue, it's kind of hard not to. I know.
right.
Yeah.
And I think, being a sanctuary state and, oh man, I don't want this to come off the wrong way, but I think that it's important to man our borders and make sure that,
Yeah.
because I think it's fairly simple for people to come across, right? And your book highlights it really well in a perfect way. Just explaining, like, how many times have you busted the same guys, right? And taken
Yeah.
down the same guys, and you arrest them, and then a year later you're finding them in another grow operation with the same issues and that sort of thing. And just, I think what you can do on an individual basis, and like I said, I don't really ever dive into politics, but pay attention to laws, voting, that sort of thing, and be conscious, especially with, we're seeing it here in Colorado with ballot box biology,
Mm-hmm.
certain species that they want to reintegrate and stuff like that, and then predator hunting and outlawing that potentially, and all that sort of stuff. So I think it's really like being educated on the issue and leaving that to biologists and that sort of thing. I know I just went on a rant there, but
No, dude, you're spot on, and I feel the exact same way. I mean, even though I'm not a resident of California, California will always be part of me. I have family, friends, ranchers. I mean, traditional cowboys still cowboying in the Silicon Valley foothills, wildlife species and hunting clubs. And I mean, California is full of good people. It's full of conservationists everywhere. You just don't see that nationally when you look at the political demographic of the Bay Area in Southern California and the
right.
LA Basin. Um, and so it's really paramount to use what's going on in that state as an example of what to learn from in our other states and even other countries that are researching this issue. And you're right. I came from a sanctuary state where we were fighting deportable felons, and a majority of the cartel criminals that were growing this illegal cannabis, poison cannabis, on private land, public land, with guns, putting, booby traps like punji pits, even in an extreme situation,
That
right
blew
on
my
our
mind
vehicle.
too. I mean,
Yeah, then that blew
imagine
my
your
mind too.
kid
And
stepping into that or something,
yeah,
it's just,
yeah. And the picture I have in Hidden is from Whiskey Town National Park in Shasta County. And my canine handler, Brian Boyd, and his amazing canine Phoebe, before she passed when she was in her prime, luckily detected that punji pit. Or our point officer, a sheriff's office sniper with Shasta County, great guy, almost steps into that.
God,
And when you look at that going on in American borders, and in a state that is actually saying, okay, we're not going to deport these folks. We're not going to work with ICE. We're not going to let you guys as officers work with federal agencies like Custom Border Protection and ICE. You're banned from talking to them, even though you're federally deputized to, be a federal agent. So when you start hearing that, you start to realize that politics and or money or whatever is motivating that decision doesn't seem in the best interest of the nation's public safety. And when we open the border up in this current administration, I mean, I was already seeing the problems with a border that was trying to be strengthened. And right after retirement, you can go to my YouTube channel to see the pilot film from our Thin Green Line film series that I host and produce for Recoil TV and Recoil Magazine Caribou, that my publishing brand that I'm connected with. There we were on the southern border. We're hunting mature outad rams. We're doing long range ethical conversations with Altera Arms, my rifle sponsor, myself, and a current captain, Mark from Fish and Wildlife's cannabis program, one of my right hand men for and buddies, for our entire careers. And there we are down on the border with an outfitter group filming this amazing hunt on a 55,000 acre canyon, like mini Grand Canyon in southwest Texas, bordering Mexico on the Rio Grande, which isn't a river. At this point, it's a creek that you can walk across. It's like 2 inches, 4 inches deep. And while we're hunting these magnificent animals, we are literally having on the other side of the ranch human smugglers, trafficking people, running, backpacks of tainted weed and dope and meth and all that kind of stuff, actually moving through and being interdicted by Border Patrol air assets, helicopters, and ATVs, and mistaking us tripping sensors in camo with big, precision, hot, long range rifles in our backpacks, and a helicopter's landing on us thinking we're cartel. And we're seeing cartel caves on the ranch with all the same camouflage and paint to subdue things where they hide out on their way to make it into America, whatever they're going to do, whether they're trafficking humans, whether they're moving, contraband, narcotics, tainted weed, whatever, and literally no protection on the border. And we get a border patrol pilot that lands, finds out who we are. He and I hit it off, obviously, given our mutual work history. And he said, "Man, you can tell the story I can't, John, with what you're doing. One little Alpine County section here of Texas, the numbers we are putting up and overwhelmed from the smuggling, the amount of tainted weed, the meth, the guns." He said, "It is unreal. And we're only one little sector in this part of Texas." And that's when the previous administration was trying to firm up a wall, get enough guys down there to make at least a dent. And now it's a wide open free for all to cross. So you can imagine, Bobby, the frustration that my marijuana enforcement team partners have. Anybody working wildlife protection is naturally frustrated. And they're still doing a great job. They're still, working around the obstacles
Right.
and trying to at least hold back the tide. And, I mean, you got to stay motivated and fight the fight, even if maybe laws and politics are against you. But at the same time, you got to realize that every criminal you stop, even if it's for just a minute, you might have saved 5 lives in that stop. You might have saved, 200 steelhead migrating trout from being in a poison creek. And you might have saved, I don't know how many kids experimenting with cannabis from ingesting some toxically tainted carbofuran tainted bud that came from one of these cartel grows because you eliminated it before it made it to the market. So, yeah, we try to win each battle and not think about winning the war, knowing how policy is kind of against that. And, all you can do is try. And all you can do is illustrate the errors that you're seeing in how those things are being run, which really undermine America as a whole. Our health, the integrity of our wildlands, unity among political groups, and all agreeing that we have to have some pride in our country. And we have to worry about, our borders first and make sure we're safe and sound here and healthy before we start dabbling in other parts of the globe. And, this is a debate, brother, I'm sure you and I hear all the time with colleagues, and all we got to do is watch any news channel any night and know what kind of craziness is going on at the Capitol, and form a relevant, a rational opinion from those events transpiring. And it's discouraging sometimes, for sure.
Yeah, well said. I couldn't agree with you more. You hit the nail on the head with that for sure. And at the same time, I want to commend, all the men and women that are out there trying to combat this thing and what you guys do, and you especially for telling the story, because I think that that's so important, and that's why I was so excited to have you on. And I thank you for taking your time out tonight and your service and all that. it's important to me, and I'm hoping that we're reaching some listeners too that will pay attention to it. With that being said, how is this funded, right? Because this is something that you guys didn't really anticipate or,
Yeah.
Division of Game and Fish didn't anticipate, having a Met team with helicopter, you know, extracts, and not to mention all the gear that you guys need, the training, having dedicated people to go and combat these cartels. I know what some game wardens here personally, and some close friends and just great service members. And the vast amount of area that one guy covers is mind
Crazy, right?
blowing, right?
Yeah,
And
it really is.
they have a lot on their plate here. So I can only imagine how how is that how is that being looked at now, especially with these different cartels coming in from not only the Mexican border, or from Mexico, some of these other countries. Is there a plan to ramp that up? Is there more funding? Is there federal funding? Is there some conservation groups that are getting behind you guys and helping with some stuff?
Yeah, we're getting some help, and what I can say is the one positive thing about cannabis regulation under Prop 64, and I think it's probably the only positive thing, honestly, is there has been some revenue that's come back to our enforcement agency and help buy equipment and pay for overtime and lead to new positions in our cannabis enforcement program, which is called CEP within the California Department of Fish and Wildlife, my alma mater agency. And basically, right now, out of 450, maybe 500 game wardens statewide doing all the diverse jobs we're taxed with doing, approximately 70 or more of those officers are dedicated just to cannabis enforcement. And that's the private land cannabis enforcement program watershed teams that are doing primarily private land enforcement compliance checks. And then you have the quasi elite tactical team that we form, the marijuana enforcement team, that is kind of the tactical unit of the whole agency, going in and doing the outdoor trespass cartel stuff, but also helping on the private land as well, because they become very dangerous as well. And because so many of these cartel and transnational criminal organization groups have moved over to private land, because now they don't really have to go way out in the forest, that might be the only other potentially positive.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to say that with a caveat. Certainly, getting these guys out of our national forests and in remote, pristine waterways is a win. But they're going to move to private land, and they're going to do just as much environmental damage. It's just
Has the
not going to
same
be
impact, right?
it has the exact same impacts. It's just not going to be out of sight, bud.
Yeah.
And what we saw with the Mongs, especially in the Chinese cartels in Siskiyou County, is there they are in a very rural, pristine tract of land that they buy and they own legally, but they go in and put up a completely unregulated cannabis farm. They cut down 100, 200-year-old old growth trees. They dig an illegal well. They start getting water not only on the surface, but they're stealing water from underground. They're poisoning it in these doughboy pools with pesticides and Molotov cocktails of who knows what's in it. And then they're pumping that into the greenhouse. So they're depleting underground water and actually competing with water for cattle, water for crops, water for drinking in these communities. And they're doing it in such a concentrated area that the remote wilderness outdoor trespass growers they're spread out more. They're having an even more drastic impact on the amount of water being stolen in a state like California under a
It's in
massive
a
drought right
severe
now.
drought.
Severe drought.
Yeah.
And when you start hearing figures like LA County, Riverside, and San Bernardino County, just for unregulated hoop house, greenhouse grows in the northern deserts of Los Angeles County, San Bernardino, Riverside, somewhere between 6.5 to close to 7 million gallons of water a day
Oh
being
my
stolen
goodness.
just in those three counties, Bobby. And and that's not even encompassing how many billions of gallons of water are being, ripped off by these illegal growers,
Yeah.
and the environmental damage they're doing all over the rest of California in a regulated state. So
That's a severe
these are the
problem. I
lessons
was
we
just
got.
down in San Diego recording down there on a remote location for our 100th episode.
Oh,
And
nice.
every time I was driving down the 5 or whatever, all the billboards don't say, like, report drunk drivers. It says conserve water.
Right.
Like, yeah,
Right.
it's mind
Yeah.
blowing. Yeah.
And we're under drought restrictions from our government in California on limited water use, and yet we're letting this happen in NorCal as an example. It was a complete
Right.
contradiction. It was so oxymoronic, and we highlight that in the Narcofornia documentary, which
Okay.
will
It's kind of what I
let
was
your
getting at with politics and, states and some of these, I don't know. I mean, we deal with the same thing here a little bit in Colorado because, majority of the population lives in Boulder or Denver or some of these bigger cities. And then you get on the Western Slope and it's all ranchers and farmers and, outfitters. And a lot of times those guys go hand in hand and they're voting on stuff that's important to them, that's affecting their
Yep.
livelihood.
Yeah,
It's
exactly.
crazy.
That's well said. Yeah.
Yeah. So diving back into the Met team a little bit, because this is super interesting to me. I've always had a fascination with operators and just,
Yeah.
I've been so fortunate in what I've done in my past to get to hang out with a lot of those guys and just incredible people. You know, Diving into that, you guys kind of had to learn on the fly because there wasn't really any sort of tactics that were set up. Like an inner city SWAT team is using, structures and stuff to hide behind and create barriers. And, you guys are in the middle of the woods with basically no cover, going into some booby traps, all kinds of different stuff. Like these, were they punji pits? Is that what you call them?
Yep.
It's kind of
Yep.
from the
Vietnam.
Vietnam era, right? The
Yep.
Viet Cong used to do that, I think, and it was they're just nasty stuff, right? And so with some of these tactics and you kind of implementing the training, can we dive into a little bit of that, like the special tactical operations? What you're training operators or SWAT team members, or it's actually Met members, right?
Yeah, and it's not something that was really cool about when we got the green light to handpick the right people for the pilot program the summer of 2013. Um, a lot of us throughout the state, or the guys that ended up being on Met permanently, especially, we were already doing this with other agencies. We were linked in with tactical units, whether they were SWAT, snipers, whatever, from different sheriff's departments. Brian Boyd was working extensively with that fantastic canine of his, Phoebe, with Shasta. I was immersed with my brothers and, guys that had really brought us on board as equals with the Santa Clara County, Silicon Valley Sheriff's Office. We had the Fresno Central Valley groups working with the captain that co-founded this thing with me, Nathaniel Arnold, now deputy chief, overseeing a lot of good stuff at the old state. So we were already working this for many years before Met happened, and a lot of our guys, retired Navy SEAL that comes on to the team, gets an operational chance to be an operator and do something like that he didn't even anticipate. And we had that conversation when I recruited him. And it was great to have people with that type of level of experience. And we all had a lot of experience doing this from a tactical standpoint. We'd either been to SWAT schools, we had become snipers. I was a sniper instructor with the sheriff's office already at that point. And we had a lot of small unit tactics on how to move quietly, how to conceal and cover, how to set up ambushes, and how to do it safely and quietly with a small unit, which is basically just a derivative of land warfare that the Navy SEALs will train on, but with an even tinier unit, right? Something a real small, tight spec ops unit in the military would do in cut off from support in extreme outdoor situations and brushy mountains, desert, high altitude. We did it all in California, as diverse as California is. So we had all the right people. Everybody had some experience. We just had to come together. We had to be formalized, and then we had to train together. And we had to refresh ourselves, and everybody, just like a SEAL special operations team or a Delta team or a Marine Corps team, whatever, everybody has a certain specialty. So obviously anybody that comes in that's really good at technology is probably going to be our radio, our surveillance, our tactics guy. We're going to have a really good trauma medic. Those of us that have been on snipers are going to have that long rifle capability, field craft and camouflage, and all those things that we even teach our cadets at the cadet level to learn that stuff because of the nature of a game warden having to be stealth even on patrol and
Right.
hide, make observations, right? So it was a challenge, but it was an exciting opportunity at the same time. And I mean, the amount of energy and motivation and just utter commitment to one another and to the job was like nothing I've ever seen in my career. And I've had a great career. I mean, I was blessed in the 28 or so years that I did this job to, you know, always work with great people, always have great support. When I became a supervisor, I always had really, really good people working with me. I don't say for me, but with me. We were always a team, and I always supported them to the end. And that was that just transcended to Met. And the cool thing about being a lieutenant as a game warden in California is you can still be in the field if you choose to be. And my thing with being the lieutenant of the Met team and forming it was, hey, I get to help build it. I get to do all the outreach and advertisements for it and network everybody's message, but I get to run missions and I get to be on the ground with everybody. And there's nothing better than doing that, man. The rewards to it and so everything I learned in those 6 years and everything the team learned together. And I still keep in touch with my old teammates. And when I break bread with them, and the lieutenant that replaced me and codename Shang in the book,
Yeah.
great friend. And, he's been the lieutenant since I left. And, he's the lead sniper on the sniper team. He's Delta One now. And just hearing his experiences in leadership and as politics have evolved in California, as COVID-19 has hit, how that has affected all of our law enforcement assets all over the country, and really kind of catalyzed and incentivized the cartels, because we went into chaos and the cartels went, woohoo, it's open
Yeah.
season.
Time to
No one's going
go.
to mess with us. And they were right.
Yeah.
They got a free pass for, in some parts of the country, about a year and a half. And in California, with my Met brothers, they got a free pass for darn near a whole grow season in that 2020 year. So all those challenges were big, but they were great. And we integrated very quickly. We were already kind of good at it because we had worked with other agencies to hone how to apprehend. Like in the first book, when you get a chance to dive into that, we go into light running that I helped co-develop where we didn't have dogs.
Yeah.
So we would have to creep up on these guys, have two riflemen cover us with ARs. And I was a marathon runner. My partners that I was an apprehender with were runners as well. And there we are with camelbacks, light body armor, a handgun, a taser. And as that guy doesn't have a gun and he tries to get away, we're going to run him down and we're going to arrest him ourselves. And if it does look like it's going to get violent, we're going to peel and let our riflemen take care of the problem. And that seems insane, but it actually worked. But we had a very structured, safe way to do it, understanding that we had to dictate our own limitations. And I talk about that light running concept in Hidden or in War in the Woods. And then we met Phoebe. And then my friend Brian, that I helped train in the academy, that's been a brother from another mother forever, and he's become the super handler with this amazing dog. And I'm watching her interdict guys and bite them as they're
Yeah, that
pulling
was so
guns,
cool, man. And it saved your
right?
life multiple times, right? And some of
Oh,
your
Bobby,
operators' lives.
I
And
get,
it was so
uh,
cool. That I love how you incorporated that into the book, and super cool. And one of the cool things about it too is when you were talking about the sniper command fire,
yeah,
that whole
yeah.
training element, and how you guys were implementing that a little bit too. So
Yeah, it's those are, and there's a lot of tactics I just don't talk about in the book for
sure.
operational security. I can't go into, but the some of the stuff we do that other domestic law enforcement special operations groups do, or the military, or snipers in general, that everybody knows you do it. It's been on TV. It's on the
It's in
internet.
Hollywood.
Um, it's been in Hollywood.
Yeah.
Whether they do it right or wrong is
Yeah.
completely inconsequential. And believe me, a lot of times they do it wrong.
Normally it's wrong.
Um, yeah, but that was a fun thing to talk about because it's something I taught in sniper schools, and it's something we had to do for all the right reasons. And I know that a lot of us in the long range precision rifle, sniper world, everything's about just as perfect as you can be, and you got to be a little bit of an OCD freak to be a good sniper. And I'm one of those guys, and maybe to a fault, and I'll
Yeah.
ding myself. But it was my mentors, John Spagnola, Spag, that you read about in both books. Yeah, we went through sniper school together, and looking at my SEAL sniper buddies like Frog, and you got to run it a certain way. And when you do that, when you can shoot that proficiently and you can shoot all at once, and it starts to become, it's just like a dance move, because you practiced it, you're mentally prepared. There's just a really good feeling of, wow, I can do this, but most importantly, I'm doing it with a group of teammates that have elevated my game. They've made me push harder as a leader. And then operators are kind of constantly trying to prove themselves to their fellow man without trying to compete with their guy, right? Uh, there's just it's a really unique part of a law enforcement role not everybody gets to do, and I really had a great time. It was a privilege, it was a blessing, and those are brothers forever. And fortunately, I get to still see how they're doing, see how they deal with the challenges in California, support them, and more importantly, be able to tell their story because they can't. Um, and
What
it's
is
we didn't
kind of
make.
your, I'm sorry to interrupt you. What is kind
Oh
of your
no,
role
good.
now in training future operators or, helping consult for certain situations? What are
Yeah.
you doing now?
A lot of what you just said. I teach some academic classes on grow safety, poisons, reclamation, officer-involved shooting debriefs of out of the 6 officer-involved shootings we were involved in my tenure, before, during, right up till the end of Met, and that second to last chapter, the Sierra
Mm-hmm.
Azul Part 2 was the last gunfight any of the Met guys were involved in, and I was with them. And when that happened, everything went our way, but that was after a lot of years of training together, a lot of years of developing tactics, a lot of years of not having the equipment or the support or the knowledge to do it as best we could. And my role now is to work with other agencies, and I do work with other federal and other state agencies on building their teams and doing the drills and avoiding the pitfalls we had to get their learning curve up to keep them safer sooner. And it's always just a treat when I get to work with teams that have a dog. And right now I get to work with a state agency that's got a canine, and that agency is working very closely with my old Met team. And I am, still a side guy to go help them part time, and do a lot of teaching and speaking just all over the country, like we're doing tonight, but talking about hidden war content, doing PowerPoints on this stuff. Conservation groups like Safari Club International. I'm an annual speaker. I do an annual seminar series at their national convention. We're actually they're moving out of Vegas and Reno for the first time, Bobby, in like 40 years. And
Really?
it's in Nashville, Tennessee this February coming up. And I
That's
just
pretty
got
cool.
called out to come. It's going to be cool. Yeah, it's going to be a different demographic. We just had our National Game Wardens Convention, the NOEA conference there, my first time to Nashville. And I'm just going to say Tennessee is an all-American state, man. They are wired for conservation. They are all about patriotism. And the fact that we're doing SCI in Nashville, and I'm going to do seminars there, we're going to have the second edition of Hidden War to drop on people. But more importantly, it's amazing how many public members, when they hear this story and they see the pictures and the videos that I talk about in Hidden War, how outraged people become, regardless of where it's from. I mean, it's a California story, but it's going on in every state to some level. And if
Right.
it's not cannabis you're dealing with these criminals, it's human trafficking going through your state. It's drug running, it's narcotics, it's synthetic fentanyl killing hundreds of thousands of people now, kids, the counterfeit prescription opioids. These cartels are in a business model of multiple activities that all prey upon people.
Yes.
And indirectly, they prey upon our environment. And it is a domestic terrorist assault on America. And I know that's a very powerful term, but literally, they're here for business, and they don't care about humanity. They don't care about water purity. They just want to make a buck, and they're destroying us from within. And so it's my job to take the hidden war of what we have on the domestic home front and emphasize that problem, and the fact that it's not a national priority to be handled like a massive wildfire campaign or a terrorism attack. I know we have a lot of bigger problems. I'm not negating anything out there, but having been on the ground fighting this thing directly and seeing the true effects, there's no way any American that knows what's going on doesn't see this as a major problem. And they all do when they know about it, but how many people really know about it? And we just got to keep broadcasting the message and make sure people know, and they're aware at least, and then we'll just go from there.
Well, you have a platform here anytime that you want, and
Thank
I
you,
think
bud.
that you're doing an outstanding job of what you are putting out there. And I think it was very helpful having, Nat Geo involved. I wish they were still following you guys,
Yeah,
doing
yeah.
some of that because it was exciting TV to watch too. It was super cool. What you brought up wildland fires, and hey, shout out to Brandon Dunham for setting
Yep.
us up, right, and connecting us
We
both. He
gotta
was
get.
like,
Yeah, I'm glad. I was gonna mention that, but you
yeah.
you segued it perfectly,
After I
Brandon.
had Brandon on, he was like, "You have to talk to John." And I was like, wait a minute, John? Yeah, yeah, of course. I'd love to have him on, So,
Yeah.
so
And
yeah,
Brandon
no,
and I, we had a great conversation on the Anchor Point podcast, man. And,
he's such a good
wildland
dude.
firefighters, he really is. And, wildland firefighters as a whole are so close to what we do on the game warden front. And me working with Cal Fire wildland guys all the time in my career, and my sister's a retired fire captain out of San Jose who ended up immersing in wildland fires too. So the whole thin red line thing is near and dear to me. And Brandon, as cool as he is, when he reached out and we got connected through another firefighter, Prene, it was a great conversation like we're having tonight, man. Very similar to this. And yeah, shout out to Brandon for sure for putting us together. Thanks, brother, for doing that.
Yeah, super cool. Great guy. Great podcast too. Definitely check that out if you're want any information on wildland firefighting and what some of those guys go through. It's kind of that whole quite professional industry there. In some of these cartel grows, I'm sure that there's fire hazards, right? These guys are doing
Oh
all
yeah.
kinds of different bad environmental stuff. And I'm sure some of these chemicals or pesticides, some of that stuff's got to be flammable, right? I mean, did you
Very
guys?
much.
I mean, that's another reason to combat it, especially with the drought situation and just where we're at with wildland fires these days.
Yeah, and we've seen a lot of their propane stoves go awry with wind. They have started numerous massive California wildfires in the dry summer because that's when they're camping, when harvest time's going on. So we do get a handful of fires caused by these guys, and certainly when a fire moves through an area like that, and you have 5-gallon compressed propane canisters and all kinds of flammable pesticides, real train wreck when the fire burns through there.
Yeah.
It gets rid of them, but what's the remnants of that burn, right? And we've seen a lot of that. And Brandon and I talked about that. Prene, being a Cal Fire guy, sees it all the time. And it's one of those things that it's just another added problem that we have to deal with on the environmental crime front and public safety front anytime you get into trespass grows on the cartel side.
For sure. So, diving into being a high level game warden and, not only going after cartels, can we talk about poaching a little bit too? Because that's important to
Absolutely.
me and
Hmm.
just some of the stuff that you've experienced there. And these cartels kind of go hand in hand, right? Because they're out there taking animals illegally, number one, poisoning them, number two. But then you have poachers on top of that, whether it's for black market or
Yeah.
I think one of the things I remember was you guys busting people on the black market that were selling like sea turtles and all kinds of crazy stuff.
Right,
Yeah.
right, yeah, yeah. The black market wildlife trade is second only to the drug trade in the world.
Wow.
It's not multi-million, it's $1 billion industry. Um, what people will pay for wildlife in different countries, and you hit it on the head. Everything from abalone to sturgeon roe to black bear gallbladders to the ivory trade now, African rhino, elephant ivory, whatever the case may be. And it's a hot mess. People have always capitalized on wildlife for profit. And when you start making money on wildlife, just like you start making money on, illegal cannabis on the cartel front, everything suffers. Public safety, environment, numbers of species. So that's a big, big, important focus. It's a national priority now. Every state agency that's a conservation agency under the Obama administration was mandated to make a wildlife trafficking team. And we built a really good one in California because we already had all that in place with our special operations groups, undercover units that were just amazing. And that was all happening right after Met got formed up. So we were getting tasked with the international black market of, wildlife trafficking, the cartel tactical problem, and now we're immersed in that, and deep internet crimes. It's just gotten more complex on the game warden front because of all the different ways we're attacking and depleting our wildlife resources. The dark web, internet sales. Wild Justice highlighted a case we had where a U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service agent sent me a notice, like a digital ad or a Craigslist ad that says, you know, um, I'm seeking a black bear hide. I want a deer
Right.
head.
That's
I
the
want
one
this.
I think I
That was the
saw.
one,
Yeah.
yeah. And that was actually my personal black bear that I spent 3.5 years harvesting
Oh, it
legally.
was?
We used that for the case. That's why when my uniform guys that did the buy bust with the suspect while I was hanging back to make the bust, I told them, I said, guys, as soon as things exchange hands, don't let that bear even fall on the ground. That is a 7-foot California black bear that was made into a beautiful rug by my good friend John Hayes, who's my taxidermist. I'm wearing his hat tonight. He's right here in Libby, right here in Libby, Montana, man. Hardcore
That's awesome.
conservationist. He was on our Thin Green line. He's also Meat Eater and Stephen Ranella's
Yeah.
taxidermist now. He was just on Meat Eater, but John had done nothing but art on and TLC on my first California black bear, and we had to use that bear because we had nothing else to use for the buy bust. And
That
I said,
shows
don't
how
even let
passionate you are about your job.
or dumb. I don't know. It's
Right.
it's one or the other. But there is a funny story to this case because you mentioned Nat Geo, and here's a behind the scenes no one's really heard. It's funny we're on it, but so they seized it right back. We put it away. We stored it in evidence. The case went fine, and it was like 8 or 9 years later, not too many years ago, that I was still working and running Met back before my retirement in 2018. And I got a call from our CalTip coordinator, and she's like, "Hey, man, I got a really weird call, but this guy's watching Wild Justice reruns, and he's watching the bear sales case on that guy up on the peninsula in San Mateo, and he's saying, 'Oh my gosh, that bear that was stolen out of my shop like 10 years ago, Lieutenant Norris found it. That's my bear. I recognize the white blades, the face. I had a rug just like it.'" And she said, "I don't know what to tell this guy." And I go, "Let me call him because I'm pretty sure, unless I've suddenly had amnesia, that was a bear I harvested personally." So he was adamant that this was his
His
bear,
bear,
and we
huh?
had suddenly found it, and he wanted to get it back from the department. And I had to, converse with him and say, "Sorry, sir, I actually harvested that myself." He said, "Oh my God, it looks just like mine."
Right.
But it was just a freaky thing that kind of brought that whole story back into play. But what was funny is, because of the black market high dollar for black bear gallbladders in California, that our undercover team would work so heavily for a long period of time, because they bring so much money on the black market overseas, 20, 30, $40,000 for a gallbladder to be ground into a powder that's an aphrodisiac in some of the other cultures.
Mm-hmm.
And when, of all the animals he advertised he wanted, we had a sample of every one, but he was fascinated and really wanted the bear. And there's this fascination with buying bears in states that they're not legal for whatever reason. And this was one of those very unique cases. But it just showed you how much end somebody will go to get an animal. And, we're talking a lot of money,
Yeah.
and to turn right around and triple or quadruple the profit, probably somewhere back east or maybe overseas is where my black bear was headed, without a doubt. So that's a constant problem, and that's still going on. And we still have all that stuff that when I was a brand new, early 20s, inexperienced, just ambitious young game warden, wanted to catch that first spotlighter. That's still going on as well. And it went on a lot more during COVID, when everybody knew there was not a law enforcement presence in the woods very much, because we weren't open to contacting people yet
Well, and
until we
people
knew
were a
what
little
the heck
bit
was
freaked out. I mean, look at the increase in hunters, like you think
right.
it's like a 30% increase or something.
It
That's
was.
like,
Yeah.
it's insane,
Yeah.
man. And like, I think we had a, it's not funny. We had a muzzle loader shoot an archery hunter this past year, and he just blatantly didn't know what the hell he was doing. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
um, so it's kind of crazy. I think that a lot of people were pretty freaked out by this pandemic thing and not knowing. I had so many people reach out to me that had never owned a gun or never hunted that wanted to get into it, and they knew that I was a bow hunter and ate elk all the time, and that I had a surplus of meat.
Yeah. Yeah.
They were offering to buy it from me and all that sort of stuff. Now, you kind of dove into some of the laws. Now, if you can get $20,000 for a gallbladder or black bear gallbladder, if you legally take an animal with a tag and everything, you can't turn around and sell that gallbladder for $20,000. That is illegal, correct?
Completely illegal.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's yours. And you can keep all those special parts that have a huge black market value. It's the second you try to monetize them that it becomes a felony. And in California, bear sales are felonies. It's one of our few felony code sections we have. in the Fish and Game Code, and that's largely because, and I'm going to make, I've never made this analogy, but it makes total sense now tonight that we're in real time talking about
Mm-hmm.
it. It's like once you monetize cannabis on the black market, look at what you incentivize. Anybody will destroy streams, they'll tear apart a forest, they may go to guns with law enforcement or a hunter to protect their financial interest because there's so much money in cannabis. Now you've turned this thing into something very deadly, very environmentally destructive because you've monetized it on a black market for massive amounts of money. Take a gallbladder,
Right.
take abalone going out on the black market, sturgeon roast. So it's all the same type of thing. And when you don't really make penalties and put enforcement emphasis on really making an example of people that are doing that because of the lasting impact it's going to have in a grander scale on a much larger market because of the money involved, you're doing the people and you're doing wildlife an extreme disservice. And when it comes to mainline poaching crimes, we do a really good job of it. I mean, obviously, we make it felonies when you start to commercialize like bears.
Mm-hmm.
Interstate, when you take something over state line on the Lacey Act, it becomes a felony with U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service that we as state wardens are deputized as federal agents to enforce as well. When it goes overseas, you start to get all these things. So if we make that round circular argument right back to prohibited cannabis, and then we look at all those environmental crimes and make those felonies, and really put the bite into the issue, not the cannabis, but the effects, then I think you're onto something.
Yeah.
And we have to treat anything that destroys the environment as an egregious poacher, whether it's an illegal, unregulated cannabis farmer, a black market black bear gallbladder, poacher, an ivory trader or poacher in Africa, incentivizing purchasers here or vice versa. It's a real good way to look at it and what the dollar sign and what money and greed will do, and how our wildlife will suffer. And we're seeing it in every level of politics and in policy, from cannabis all the way down to wildlife, in California as an example. And it's a real good analogy to make of what happens when you turn it to all about the black market dollar.
Right. Yeah. And I don't know. That's one of the most sickening things to me is that, or just the disrespect for wildlife. I don't think that any real outdoorsman or hunter is out there poaching. That's just my
Right.
opinion. I think it's a different level of sick human.
Yeah.
um, so let's talk about all the different stuff that you got going on. You have the second edition of Hidden War coming out. You also have the book out, War in the Woods. You
Yep.
have the Green Line podcast. Is that correct?
Yeah, I co-host Warden's Watch
Okay.
and a podcast called The Thin Green Line, and that's with Lieutenant Wayne Saunders, retired lieutenant out of New Hampshire, also a veteran of Animal Planet's Northwoods Law. Wayne started the Warden's Watch podcast, interviewing game wardens for Game Warden Stories, right when he retired, about the same time I did. And I was a guest on his show, I'm going to say 4 or 5 months after I retired. And then in COVID, he said, "Hey, man, if you've got the time, would you co host with me? You're on the West
Very cool.
Coast. You've got to reach with some of the podcasts you've been on, and the unique special operations side is what most game wardens don't do. So we kind of got both ends of the country covered. So there's a diversity of stories there. But something we realized in COVID was we want to go past just interviewing fellow game wardens. I mean, those stories are great, but what about the military veterans? What about guys like you? What about other hunters? What about other biologists, musicians, patriots that were in politics that are big conservationists, And so we started the Thin Green Line together, and I roped in Ed Calderon, Jack Carr, who's a real
I love
good
Jack
friend of
Carr,
mine.
man.
Yeah, Jack's amazing. He's a brother,
Have
and
you been on Danger Close yet? His
I have.
podcast is great.
Yeah,
Yeah. I'll
yeah.
have to
I
go
had
back
a
and download that.
Yeah, it was a good conversation, and we had Jack on our podcast. We
Very
had
cool.
Lieutenant Colonel Oliver North. Um, he has so much conservation history in his family that he passes down to his grandkids. I get the chills thinking about it. And he doesn't do too many podcasts, but he endorsed Hidden War. He was one to really read it because his cinematographer and my cinematographer is a retired Airborne Ranger, Dennis Azzato, good friend of mine, and he was working with Colonel North on his series and said, "Hey, Colonel, you got to read this book. John's a friend. If you can time, endorse it. You'll be blown away by it." And he took the time,
So
Bobby, and that was
cool.
really an honor. And he spent over an hour on our podcast from his home, on the East Coast. And when you bring in thin green line conservationists like that outside of game warden circles, it's really magical. I've become close with the band Shinedown because all those guys are so into the outdoors. You know,
Right.
they do plant trees every year, you know, worldwide. And I was a joint guest on my buddy John Silverspear. He's their security director. He had Barry Kirsch and I, their drummer, on together. And Barry's, you know, tying flies and hunting a tree stand, and he's an outdoor culinary cook. He's picking my brain, and you know, and we had Barry on our own podcast, and you know, we had to make it a two-parter. We
Very
just went
cool.
down the rabbit hole. So, and that's what we need, brother. We need to get, you know, guys like you, these other podcasters, musicians, you know, athletes, conservationists, whether they come from a political background or a military background, and it's a combined effort. And again, expanding the thin green line outside of the traditional law enforcement officer, game warden, and that's what I'm doing a lot of now in retirement. And that's what's so cool about phase two is we can talk about these issues freely. I'm not under any gag orders, you know, like I would
Right.
be in my
Yeah.
old
For a long
agency.
time. Yeah.
Understandably so. It's the way it goes. I'm not digging on anybody. But but yeah, we're doing those two podcasts. Once a year I host the Thin Green Line film series, and it's got to be just the right conservation hunting story where there's also public safety issues involved, usually cartel related. The first one was down in Southwest Texas on the Mexican border, which is the pilot program. It's up on my YouTube channel. You can see all my content, wild justice stories, commercials, documentaries, investigative news. That's all on the John Norris YouTube channel. Everything's free. I don't monetize. I don't charge. I don't do private stuff. Anything I put out there, we want to help educate, and I'm just very grateful that people that view it, if they like it, they'll share it. Um,
Very
but
cool.
we did that pilot film, bud, in February of, we literally did that in February, and 3 weeks later we were in lockdown from COVID. We didn't know it was coming yet, but thank God it happened when it did, because we got the first pilot episode out. The next episode is going to be filmed on a Fognac Island on, you know, big mature brown bears, the island bears, and we're going to talk about some of the crimes that are going on up there. And that's kind of a dream bucket list hunt. But more importantly, we're going to get into the, you know, that the furthest reaches of the most remote islands of Alaska are affected by
Are
these
being
embedded
impacted as
cartel
well, huh?
groups on some level. Yeah. So
Wow.
that's going to be our next film coming up next May. I've got a couple of blades, and I know you may have seen them, but I merged with Mike Belkamp, who
I didn't
started the
know that.
Spyderco
Yeah.
Factory. You got the old thin green line,
Yeah.
you know, serrated or non-serrated, drop point for skinning and gutting, glass
Very cool.
breaker, seatbelt harness. I got an OD green version for the tactical types, non-serrated. This is my skinning and hunting carry knife, and we actually are on our second run of those. I finally have some in stock. I'm doing personal sales and personalized blade packages with books. Just reach me up through my website or on my, you know, direct message me on Instagram if anyone's interested in any of that. And outside of product, if anyone has questions about being a game warden or experiences, anything I can do to help the next generation get through some of the hurdles I didn't anticipate, I'm more than glad to. And I just want to encourage as many folks to be part of the Thin Green Line and how critical it is. And on Instagram, I'm just at John Norris, JOHNNORES. Same thing on Facebook. My email is trailblazer413@yahoo.com, trailblazer with a Z 413@yahoo.com. And you can get to me through everything, see everything I'm doing on my website, which is just johnnorris.com. And it has it all.
Very
So
cool.
that's it. Trying to,
Yeah.
yeah, throw it out quick. Not
Yeah, no,
belabor it. So,
that's incredible, and I think you know, being a mentor for other people that may want to serve like you did is awesome too. I think we need more of that in this country for sure.
amen to that, brother.
So you're spending some time up in Montana, and by the way, you know, we need to talk after this a little bit when you have some time over
Sure.
the next few days, because I got some awesome guests for the podcast for you. We've been
Okay.
super fortunate here, and you know, it's all about networking and helping each other out. So yeah,
Absolutely. I'll
and
throw it right back at
yeah,
you for sure.
that's awesome. So you're up in Montana. You getting to do some hunting up there, and I know you're an outdoorsman
Oh, yeah.
yourself, and
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
incredible up
No,
there. I used to spend my summers up there as a kid. I have an uncle that lives outside of Kalispell still, and
there you go. Yeah. I
that's
was in
God's
California.
country up there.
Then you know right where I'm at. You know the
Yeah.
special Northwest. You know the remote part of Montana.
I'll tell you a Libby story. And one of my fondest memories is we went to, it was the middle of summer, and we went to like a rodeo, or it was like a bull riders only thing or
Okay.
something.
Yeah.
and I'd never really experienced anything like that. Um, but anyways, it got dark, and the arena had no lights. So these guys were riding bulls in the dark, and I just thought that that was the
That's
wildest
awesome.
fucking thing. I mean, you could barely see them. It was a dark night too.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
I know my community of Libya, and we don't quit for darkness.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just that doesn't surprise me, but
Right.
I can't speak any injuries or collisions that were induced from that. But
Right.
that's typical for like the powers out. Yeah, um, yeah. Northwest Montana is magical. My grandfather settled here 40 years ago after a full career in the Navy. I haven't told this story, I think, publicly much at all, but he was set to deploy and join the Navy right as World War II was ramping up. And before he did, he brought some friends from high school up here to the Libya area. And you can imagine what it was like back then. He was hunting
Oh man.
our hot spots in the yak and cabinets, and they were stacking massive whitetail and elk and black bear. And he said, when I retire, I'm going to buy a plot, and whoever wants to come from the 9 kids in my grandparents' family can settle. And that's what happened. He felt, he was in Pearl Harbor. He was on a cruiser that got, half sunk and but survived it,
Wow.
and had a full, decorated military career all over the world and several wars. But he settled here, and thankfully, he kind of set our family up, and my dad kind of set me up before he passed in 2013 to have a plot on the family spread.
Oh, that's
So
so
yeah,
cool.
that's home, but it's one of those things where I'm not home a lot. Obviously,
Right.
there's a road show going on. A lot of it's back in the Golden State, but it's other states as well. But I'm here as much as possible a majority of the year, and certainly to get off the grid and decompress. And the woods are my
So
church is my
important.
motto. It was my
Yeah.
dad's motto. We need it, and I just don't get enough of that. And even when I'm in California, I still got to get on my buddy ranchers' places and get behind lock gates and clear my head and chase an animal, whatever, or just enjoy it. And from everything you do, man, you feel it too in the great state of Colorado, and Montana. I'm surprised to hear that. That's super cool.
Yeah,
But
no,
yeah,
it
it's
is
home,
cool.
and it's a good balance. And certainly where I do most of my writing and revisions and magazine articles, I like to write in this space more so than other places. It just comes more natural when you're in your element.
I couldn't agree more. And it's beautiful up there. I was planning on making it up there this summer, but I haven't yet. But I'll let you know the next time I'm up there, and we'll do this in person maybe.
Please do.
We'll
Yeah,
bring the
we will
kit.
make something happen for sure.
And the town of Libby was named after was it General Custer's wife or something, right? Wife's name was Libby
I
or
believe it
something. I
was.
think she
Yeah,
was
I
from, I don't know.
something like that. Hmm
Yeah, kind
Yeah,
of. That's
I've
the
heard
only
the
history
rumors.
I
I
know
haven't
about
researched it
Libby
though.
and going through there. So
Yeah, I definitely got to get my history down because I'm not 100% sure on that, but that sounds about
yeah.
right. Yeah.
One thing I wanted to touch on, and we could go for on and on, but we're gonna wrap this thing up here pretty quick. But I
Sure.
kind of ask a lot of our guests a lot of different questions. What they're experiencing and what they're seeing in outdoors to that people could be doing better. But I think where I want to hit home with you on this is, if you're an outdoorsman, and what can you be looking out for when you run across a cartel grow or something like that? How do you report it? What's the best way to handle it? And what's the best way to keep yourself safe? Generally
Yeah.
people are out recreating with families, friends, pets, stuff like that, unless you're in the backcountry, hunting on your own or something.
Yeah, that's a great question. First and foremost is I don't want anyone to freak out thinking they can't go in the woods and enjoy, our public lands because they're going to run into a cartel grow. That would mean they've won. And we all know how dwindled and how limited and how reduced public lands are becoming. And they are our sanctuary. There are diamonds out there. So let's utilize them. Let's protect them. If you do encounter something like seeing a water line, seeing marijuana plants, seeing, caches in sea bags or backpacks hidden on a trail, but they don't belong to anybody, you could be going towards a trespass grow. You might walk right into one and not even know it and see, worst case, armed gunmen walking around. Don't panic. Use your outdoor skills. If you're a hunter, an angler, or a hiker, be stealthy. Don't make a lot of noise. Hide in plain sight. Move slowly when you need to if the threat is looking at you. Um, Memorize or document where you're at if it's safe to do so, whether it's a cell phone picture that's going to have a GPS code on it or a tag, okay, or get a GPS if you have that capability on your phone or your handheld, and backtrack the way you came in and just do it as quietly as possible. And as soon as you have cell coverage, call 911, get a hold of your sheriff's office, your game warden. Usually it's going to be an allied effort, regardless of who gets the call first. And just report it immediately. Don't let it go. We've had hunters that saw one and thought about it and were stuck for, days behind locked gates and they didn't have cell coverage. And, you know, you want to get that out as fast as possible because obviously the public safety environmental threats are obvious, regardless how big it is, regardless of who's responsible. That's the best way to handle it. And we, ironically, our CalTip, 1-800 turn in a poacher number, Bobby, in California, the last 6 years I was running Met, more than 50-60% of all CalTips weren't for traditional poaching cases. They were for illegal grows.
Really?
Oh yeah, hunters running
Wow.
across them, in deer season, in our refuges and waterfowl tracks of all places in the central, the central sink of Northern California where our flyway is. Yeah, it was
I think
crazy.
that that's so important. A great point to bring up, is that we're all in it together. Like you said earlier, with the thin green line. If you see
Yep.
something, report it. Don't question it. I think it's important. Any sort of wildlife violations, environmental stuff. I think it's the only way that we can combat stuff like that is letting the proper people know.
Yeah, I agree, man. And like I said, everybody's part of the thin green line. And, you know, we are so thin in the area we cover as game wardens without the eyes and ears of our fellow soldiers, and that's you guys that are out there hunting, fishing in areas we're not going to get to because we can't possibly get to those remote areas. And it's always the hardcore angler, the hardcore hunter, or the hardcore adventurer that's off the beaten path. They're down in the headwaters of creeks, and they stumble upon
Trying
that
to get
one
away from
cartel
people.
grow. They're trying to get away from people, so they're going where the cartel are going to hide, and they're finding the ones that are most environmentally damaging because they're
Hmm.
sitting right on some pristine headwater to a stream. So yeah, we really appreciate that. We just don't want anybody hurt in the process, and just be careful doing it. And if you're situationally aware, more than anything else, 9 times out of 10, you're going to be just fine getting out of it because we've seen, given the numbers of people that have encountered and found grows that were active, that didn't get hurt because they handled it properly.
Perfect. Well, that's great. What do you got coming up next for you? And I know you're a busy guy and got all kinds of irons in the fire and busy with work and all that sort of stuff. You got anything
Yeah,
that we need to bring out?
a couple things I forgot to bring out, maybe because it's so recent, but besides just co-hosting with the Daily Caller, the Narcofornia documentary, with my friend and co-host Jorge Ventura and their great producer Sagnik Basu, um, we're doing the Call Sign Trailblazer documentary, which is a cinematic, complete, kind of professional and personal backstory documentary highlighting a lot of the issues we've talked about tonight. We literally just filmed the last segments and interviews and tactical shooting and a reenactment 2 days ago here in Montana. And we've been in production since February and literally in California for a week every month, doing field interviews, site visits, a bunch of stuff with a bunch of incredible subjects and folks we interviewed. We have a reformed guerrilla grower, non-cartel, that actually reached out to me very recently, wanting to use his powers for good after all the water he stole with his operations, the trash he put out there. Non-cartel, never used banned poisons, never was armed to hurt people, but let's just say was operating in the same area as the cartels operate in the Emerald Triangle. And we had a heck of a site visit with him on how it goes down and an interview. You won't be able to see or identify or know who he is, but that was a real eye opener. That's never happened. Nobody's ever really, from that level of experience, wanted to talk. But he heard me on Joe Rogan and then followed me and heard me again on Jack Carr many years later and decided to pull the trigger and reach out. I'm really grateful he did. Again, he's one of these
Super
guys that's
cool.
part of the Thin Green Line. We have legitimate growers that are being run out by, the black market, agency officials, you name it. We have a lot of people we interviewed. We have a lot of experiences I get to share. We filmed a lot of it in Montana, and now we're going into editing, original score for it, voiceover, and by the end of the year, it's going to be done. I don't know if we're going to have it available quite yet because it will. Some streaming services want it, but we want to run it through the film festival circuit first. And then I'm going to see that people have access to it once it clears that, no later than early next spring, so people can view it and it, learn a little bit more about the stuff we're talking about tonight. It was a huge honor to work with a great production crew at a level I've never experienced, with a level of equipment and motion picture making type documentary. But that's been a lot of work, and just getting everything done on the revision of Hidden War that literally got submitted day before yesterday. So it's a good full plate. And the one thing I do have going on up here that I talk about a little bit is I'm part of a cover rock band called Area 56.
Oh, really?
Uh,
Rock and
yeah,
roll. And
yeah.
you're into desert racing too, or something, right? Like,
I do a little bit of that. But yeah, our band right now, we're gigging tomorrow
cool.
over at the Sandpoint Fairgrounds. They got a rodeo thing going on, and we're gonna be one of the bands wrapping up their 3-day event, and we're down to our last 3 gigs of the year, and it's been a fun year with the guys, and a good way to branch out outside of the typical story and the
Right.
intensity of the work, and they're incredibly musicians, and they brought me on board as the newest guy, so having fun with that, and yeah, just keeping it busy, and I trying to get in the woods as much as possible like you, brother, trying to
Very
high
cool.
lake fish, made it into some glacier cutthroat trout fishing yesterday by myself, and
Really?
yeah, had a good day, and doing long range shooting all the time and testing. I'm going to be doing some profiles and some products from SIG and Altera Arms. My new line of fixed blades, the Trailblazer Thin Green Line fixed blades, are dropping within a month or two, and
Very
we'll have
cool.
those available. We'll drop the commercial, so never a dull moment, but always trying to keep it in balance and doing a lot of this. Just hosting our own, but really lately I've been getting the good graciousness of guys like yourself to be asked to come on the podcast. And it's not an old subject telling the Hidden War story because it keeps evolving,
Right.
especially after what we just saw in Siskiyou County and what we did in Arcofornia and stuff. I'm going to go in even deeper that wasn't revealed in that documentary and the Call Sign Trailblazer film. It's just amazing how this thing just keeps becoming a problem and growing, and how much of a national priority it is. So I kind of feel like I didn't really leave the job. I just changed roles. People say, "Well, you're not retired at all. You're working as crazy as you were before," and they're right.
If not
But
more,
but
right?
but yeah,
Yeah.
But it's phase two now, Bobby. It's phase
Right.
two, and the cool thing about that is I get to see it from a national perspective, and I get to talk to people from all over the country, and agencies and game wardens and federal agencies, and get perceptions on what's really going on the border. Which even when I was running the Met team and directly fighting the cartels daily, it was from California's perspective, and now I get to see it all over the country, coast to coast, north, south, east, west, and it's even more overwhelming. So
Right.
it's a real privilege, man, and it's a real privilege and honor to be able to talk about it with you on your platform and talk to your folks. And certainly, I'm here for questions, like I said, through my Instagram direct message or my website and email if anybody
Yeah,
has
do me a
anything
favor.
further.
Send myself and Gabby all those links, and we'll
I will.
put direct links in the show notes. So if you're listening to this right
Okay.
now, all you have to do is open the show notes, and you'll have a direct link.
Yeah, right when we get off, I'll send you links to YouTube, to a website, to some teasers, uh, all of it. And yeah, I appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem at all, man. Glad to share the message. Like I said, you always have a platform here. And thank you so much for sharing the message, John. I mean,
You bet.
really being an advocate, a voice for conservation, and shedding a light on so many levels, man. I can't, my hat goes off to you, and I want to help you guys as much as I can. So you're welcome here anytime.
Appreciate you, Bobby. Thanks,
Yeah.
Gabby, for your help tonight. Good to see you guys both remotely, and we will talk again. Thanks so much. Appreciate
Thank
you.
you. Thanks everybody for listening. Go check out John, follow him, read the books, important information in there. And yeah, let's support these guys. Thank you.
Hit more, baby. Thanks.
Thanks for listening to the Mountainside Podcast. If you haven't had a chance to do this already, please take a moment, follow, like, subscribe, or rate on whatever platform you catch the Mountainside Podcast at. Also, if you'd like some more information on upcoming episodes, safety tips, access to all of our affiliates, and all the badass discounts that we get here at the Mountainside Podcast, check out themountainsidepodcast.com.